A Chinese spy ship is speeding towards a U.S. aircraft carrier. What will the crew do? Military incidents between the U.S. and China at sea are becoming more frequent and tense. One of the most concerning scenarios is a Chinese spy ship approaching an American aircraft carrier. Aircraft carriers, as the backbone of U.S. naval power, play a critical role in maintaining global security and projecting force. However, Chinese surveillance ships routinely attempt to get close to these strategic assets. Since relations between the U.S. and China have escalated in the South China Sea, these incidents have only increased. Have you ever wondered what might happen in such a situation? What actions would the U.S. and China take? What dangers does such a standoff between two of the world's most powerful nations hold? Stay with us and you'll find out the answers to all these questions. Let's start by examining the legal side of the issue. The primary framework governing the behavior of military ships in international waters is the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, UNCLOS. According to this document, nations have the right to freedom of navigation in international waters, but they must follow certain rules to maintain peace and security. International maritime law requires military vessels to keep a safe distance from each other, especially if they belong to nations that are in hostile or tense relations. A safe distance is defined as one that does not pose a threat or provoke either side. However, these rules are often ignored, particularly by countries like China or Russia, who frequently attempt to approach U.S. aircraft carriers or other military assets. Why do they do this? Certainly not for a selfie with an American warship in the background, although sometimes it's for that too. So why are the Chinese so determined to rattle the nerves of high-ranking Pentagon admirals by getting too close to U.S. aircraft carriers? First, it's a political display of strength. It's as if they're saying, look how tough we are, and we're not afraid of you at all. Sure, you might have a supercarrier like the USS Gerald R. Ford, along with 10 other slightly less formidable nuclear carriers, each weighing around 100,000 tons and armed with nearly 100 combat aircraft. But we're strong and brave. We have the means to destroy your carriers, and we want the whole world to see that China is also a powerful superpower, not willing to back down in its sphere of influence. Admit it, if someone dares to tug on a lion's mane, they earn a certain amount of respect and fear from others. But it's not just about taking a selfie. It's also about gathering intelligence. The Chinese spy ship is collecting as much data as it can about the U.S. carrier. These ships are equipped with sophisticated surveillance systems that allow them to intercept radio transmissions, record electronic signatures from various systems on the carrier, document flight preparations, takeoffs, landings, and other procedures, and monitor the ship's maneuvers. As we mentioned earlier, most of these provocations take place in the South China Sea. The reason's simple. China considers it their exclusive territory. They even developed a special doctrine back in the mid-20th century called the 9-dash line, which is a line on a map used by China to mark its territorial claims in the South China Sea. This territory includes the Paracel Islands, Spratly Islands, and other areas. And China completely ignores the fact that these territories are also claimed by Vietnam, the Philippines, Malaysia, Brunei, and Taiwan. In fact, under international law, these countries have more legitimate claims to them. But China doesn't just make claims, it's actively bringing this doctrine to life. Since 2013, China has been rapidly building artificial islands in the South China Sea, using massive dredging operations to create bases that quickly turn into airfields and docks for military aircraft and ships. They also constantly interfere with the freedom of navigation for other countries. For example, in May 2014, China installed an oil platform in waters claimed by Vietnam. This led to clashes between Chinese and Vietnamese ships, including ramming incidents and the use of water cannons. In April 2020, Malaysia was conducting oil exploration in an area also claimed by China. In response, China sent military vessels to patrol the area, carrying out dangerous maneuvers near Malaysian ships. Of course, neither Vietnam, the Philippines, nor Malaysia can match China's economic or military power, but the U.S. has come to their aid. And it's not just because about 30% of the world's maritime trade, worth trillions of dollars annually, passes through the South China Sea. Controlling this region means controlling major trade routes, which makes it critically important to both China and the U.S. and its allies. It's not even just about the vast oil and gas reserves in the area. By some estimates, the South China Sea could contain about 11 billion barrels of oil and 190 trillion cubic feet, 5 trillion cubic meters of natural gas. And maybe it's not even about the U.S. as a bastion of democracy opposing those who use force to suppress the rights of weaker nations. The real issue is that if the U.S. wants to remain the global leader, it must confront anyone who disrupts the established world order, whether that's Russia, China, or Iran. That's why the U.S. regularly sends its aircraft carriers to patrol the South China Sea and conduct joint exercises with Taiwan, the Philippines, or Vietnam. And the White House fully understands that any mission in these waters will inevitably attract unwelcome attention from China, sometimes bordering on harassment. It's like when you're reading something on your tablet on a plane and the person next to you isn't just glancing over but is blatantly leaning over, breathing on you. So how do the U.S. Navy personnel handle such a situation? When a Chinese spy ship approaches an American aircraft carrier, the crew on the carrier follows a precise chain of actions aimed at assessing the threat, protecting the ship, and preventing escalation. Let's break down their response step by step. First, the Chinese ship is detected by the carrier's tracking systems, such as powerful multifunction radars, automatic ship identification systems, and satellite surveillance. The electronic warfare specialists immediately begin analyzing signals from the Chinese vessel to determine its exact type and mission. Is it civilian or military? Spy ships can often disguise themselves as civilian vessels, so additional checks are required. The operations team aboard the carrier gathers data on the activity of the Chinese ship, monitoring its course, speed, and maneuvers. If the Chinese vessel is heading directly towards the carrier or maintaining a specific distance, this could indicate reconnaissance or aggressive intentions. The watch officers relay this information to the command, which begins making decisions. If the situation escalates beyond routine monitoring, the captain may pass the information up the chain to the fleet command for further action. Now let's say the captain decides that the situation is serious. The shipwide announcement, General Quarters, is issued, signaling battle stations, or Condition 2, meaning heightened readiness without immediate combat engagement. Anti-air and electronic warfare units immediately ramp up efforts to suppress any attempts to intercept communications or other data from the carrier. Jamming systems are activated. As the Chinese ship approaches what's considered a threatening distance, usually 12 nautical miles, about 22 kilometers or 14 regular miles, carrier-based aircraft like FA-18 Hornets or F-35s, as well as helicopters, are launched. They fly over the spy ship, recording it with photo and video equipment. The carrier crew establishes communication with the Chinese ship via international channels and warns them to maintain a safe distance. The message typically includes a reminder of their obligation to follow international laws, such as Chinese military vessel. This is the U.S. aircraft carrier USS Gerald R. Ford. According to international maritime law and the United States Convention on the Law of the Sea, you're required to maintain a safe distance and not interfere with our operations. Any further approach will be considered a violation of international rules. Immediately alter your course and increase the distance. Please acknowledge receipt of this message. Over. The carrier's air support begins shadowing the Chinese vessel at a safe distance, demonstrating their readiness to defend the carrier if necessary. This serves as a deterrent and a reminder of U.S. military strength. The carrier strike group may also perform evasive maneuvers or change course to show that they're prepared for any unforeseen situation. At the same time, other escort vessels, destroyers, cruisers may move closer to the Chinese ship to monitor it more closely. Depending on the level of threat, the carrier captain may pass the information to Pacific Fleet Command or the U.S. Navy's Operational Task Force. The decision on further actions depends on the assessment of the Chinese ship's approach and its potential threat. Alongside these actions at sea, diplomatic channels are activated. The U.S. may issue a formal warning to China through diplomatic or military channels, reminding them that such actions are unacceptable. But what if, despite the radio warnings, flyovers by carrier-based fighters, and all other efforts, the Chinese ship continues to approach the carrier? What happens next? If the Chinese vessel continues closing in, the carrier may shift to Condition 1, full combat readiness. All weapon systems, including air defense, missiles, and aviation, will be primed for immediate use. If the Chinese ship still does not retreat, intercepts may be carried out by destroyers or carrier aircraft, and warning shots may be fired, either into the direction or across the bow, to force it to change course. Sometimes Chinese ships deploy drones or underwater vehicles for more precise surveillance of American ships. These devices can be used to collect data on the carrier's underwater defense systems and communications. Of course, if they approach too close, usually within 1 nautical mile, they're destroyed either by fire from the carrier or by escort ships. Now let's return to the Chinese spy ship, which continues charging forward, plowing through the waves, ignoring even the warning shots. In this case, with authorization from higher command, possibly from the Pentagon or even the White House, lethal force may be used against the Chinese vessel. The first step would be to engage it with small caliber weaponry, most likely the Mk-38 Mod 2, a 25mm automatic cannon used to defend against small surface threats. The Phalanx Sea-Whiz, a close-in weapon system designed to protect against anti-ship missiles and other air threats with its 6-barrel 20mm M61 Vulcan, could also be employed. Fighter jets could engage with their cannons. FA-18 Hornets using the M61 Vulcan, and F-35s equipped with the 4-barrel 25mm GAU-22A. Initially, shots would be aimed at the hull of the ship, but if it continues closing in, fire would be directed at the control bridge. If even after this the Chinese ship persists, the order to destroy it would be given. This could be done in several ways. First, using FA-18 Hornets or F-35C fighters armed with AGM-84 Harpoon anti-ship missiles and laser-guided GBU 10, 12, 16 paveway bombs. Second, anti-ship weapons from the destroyers and cruisers accompanying the carrier could be used, including Harpoon missiles of various modifications. In any case, the Chinese vessel would not be allowed to close in on the carrier. We're certain that somewhere in a classified document there's a protocol that dictates if an enemy vessel gets too close, say within 3 or 4 miles, a ship from the carrier strike group must intercept and block its path so that in the worst-case scenario, the carrier itself is not hit. For example, a Chinese Type 815 spy ship, commonly used for surveillance of U.S. carriers, has a displacement of 6,000 tons. If it were fully loaded with explosives and collided with the carrier, it could destroy it. Of course, this would likely trigger World War III, but no one wants to lose a carrier at the very start of such a conflict. This is an extreme case, though. How does the U.S. respond after such incidents? After the Chinese vessel leaves the area or the situation is resolved, the carrier crew conducts a full assessment of the incident. All data is recorded, reports are compiled to analyze the enemy's actions, improve readiness, and prepare for the next incident. Everyone knows that another will come. It's inevitable as the underlying tensions between the U.S. and China remain. What do you think? How might these incidents between U.S. and Chinese ships ultimately play out? Let us know in the comments. That's it for today's video. We'd love to see your likes and subscriptions to our channel. See you again soon.